Hi ladies, welcome to the What Like It's Hard podcast, a legal podcast for women. Ultimately, the lawsuit was settled out of court, mostly because there was so much publicity to this specific case, and it was very negative. And, the company just wanted it over and done with. So the unfortunate part is within 5 years of the settlement, all 5 girls were dead. I'm your host, Jasmine, and I am so stoked that you are here. Get cozy, grab a Starbucks, and let's chat about the Radium girls. I was first exposed to the Radium girls one evening when I was bored out of my mind, and I'm sure you ladies can relate with the whole COVID situation going on. I literally watched pretty much every movie on Netflix so far. And I was scrolling one day. I saw this movie called The Radium Girls. It had Joey King on the page. So I was like, I love Joey King as an actress. So obviously if you support any actress, you're going to support all their movies. So I was like, let me check it out. So I ended up watching the movie The Radium Girls. And it just blew my mind. My eyes were opened. I could not believe what these girls went through. These girls were young, beautiful, smart. They had their whole life ahead of them. By working at a company that did not care for their well-being, did not want to be held liable for any illness caused by their instructions, they ended up dying. But 5 girls were very brave, and they fought literally until their death in a litigation against the U.S. Radium Company. This was based in the 1920s. These girls worked for a company called U.S. Radium Corporation in the 1920s. We just went to war. Soldiers were overseas. Women were entering the workforce. Watches that were glow in the dark were in high demand for these soldiers. So what did U.S. Radium Company do? They wanted to hire girls to paint the dials of these watches with this undark, that's what it was marketed as, undark paint, which was radium paint. This was a desirable job. Like, this substance was brand new. Nobody knew the harmful effects of it to the body. So it was literally advertised as a beauty supplement. So the job was super attractive to women. It paid well. It offered them financial freedom. They had access to radium, which is like the newest beauty supplement out there at the time. And a lot of girls used it to paint their nails. Some people painted their teeth because it would glow in the dark, which is awesome. Anything that glows in the dark is amazing. I remember when I was a kid, I had, those glow in the dark stars on my ceiling. So at night when I would go to bed, I would see like the glow in the dark stars. It's pretty cool. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's definitely attractive to anybody. They were just happy. They were like, I have a job, I get access to this new undark situation, and life is good. After a while, a few girls noticed very terrible pain in their bones and around their mouth area. They had no idea what it was. They went to the doctor. They were diagnosed with syphilis. That was shocking to me because the company, first of all, let me just say the company schemed so much and it was terrible. They did not want to be held liable to that illness they caused the women. So if they got diagnosed with syphilis, which is a misdiagnosis, they would not be held liable for that, because obviously you can't contract syphilis from the job that they were doing. So after a while, let me get to my notes because I have notes here. The first girl who passed from this situation at work was in 1922. So between 1922 and 1933, 22 dial painters were known to have died from the occupational disease. So let's just look into the life of a radium girl. A day in the life of a radium girl included going to work. They sat very close to other girls. So radium dust would be in the air. They would inhale it. It would be all over their clothes. And like I said, a lot of them would paint their nails with it. Obviously, the nature of their work required them to ingest a lot of amounts of radium. So they would sit down. They would grab their paintbrush, put it in between their lips / tongue to get a very fine point. They would dip that brush into the paint. Depending on their work ethic and their speed, some girls ingested more than others. After a while, some girls noticed very strange pains in their mouth specifically and their bones. Pretty gory things started to happen. Basically, their gums started bleeding, their teeth started falling out, their bones were like crumbling. Basically, they were on the path to death. The first dial painter to die was Molly Maggia, and she died in September of 1922, and she was 24 years old. So pretty young girls worked here. I think the youngest was 14 or 15. How it started for Molly specifically is she had aching tooth pains, and then she started having pains in her limbs, and it was so severe she couldn't walk. She died. And on her certificate, this is where it gets interesting. Her birth certificate says she died of syphilis. Syphilis. The shocking part is all the radium girls who went to the doctor and complained of those kind of pains, they were all diagnosed with syphilis, meaning they didn't get the proper treatment, meaning that diagnosis wasn't caused by the job, so U.S. Radium Corporation didn't have to be liable. That in itself is a legal issue because they were misdiagnosed. U.S. Radium didn't want to be held responsible, so obviously you can't contract syphilis from the kind of work they're doing, meaning they're not responsible for it. So this went on for a while. So between 1922 and 1933, 22 dial painters died. The significance of the Radium Girls, it's one of the earliest documented efforts to receive compensation for any occupational disease. So that brings me into what laws were affected. OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Association, that's a big significance. And WHO, World Health Organization, basically it aligns with the promotion of health and safety at work, which is concerned with preventing harm and hazards from the workplace. A big thing about this case also, it was so hard for the girls to find an attorney for a number of reasons. It was hard to find an attorney to take this case because basically, first of all, financially, the women were piling on medical bills, so they couldn't really afford to pay an attorney. Also, the nature of the case. So they wanted to file a lawsuit against U.S. Radium Corporation. And at the time, it was a big company. It was like a head honcho, and nobody wanted to take them down. Once the girls found an attorney, finally, they had another difficult thing to overcome. That was how to properly identify their injury because they knew it was coming from work. As much as the company denied it, they knew. They needed to find a doctor that could properly diagnose them and give them a proper name for their condition. So once the proper name was found, and that proper name was radium narcosis, how the body absorbs radium is basically similar to calcium. Once it's ingested, it goes straight to your bones, which is why the ladies had bone pain, jaw pain. Some of the ladies' jaw fell out. Like, it was very gory and very terrible. They have a name for the diagnosis. Awesome. So now that they have a name for the condition, they have to prove that that injury was caused by U.S. Radium Corporation. And they have to ask for, a settlement. That's basically what they are after. Not only a settlement, but also how to stop this from happening in the future. It's hard if you don't have the name of the injury. You don't have the proof that it was attained from your job. And so a lot of women wouldn't receive compensation for their injury. Some dial painters suffered no ill effects, and some suffered severe effects until as far as death. So a question that came up into the lawsuit was, why were some symptoms different than others, and why weren't all girls affected in the same way? At that point, the litigant wasn't able to answer. The U.S. Radium Corporation's attorney's argument was basically, if the symptoms were a result of the same quote-unquote occupational disease, and the women were working at the same plant doing the same job, wouldn't they all have the similar symptoms? In response to this, the Radium Girls' attorney said that they weren't taking into facts that all workers didn't have the same exposure. It varied from work habits, pre-existing conditions, varying lengths of exposure. Basically, like, some girls worked harder than others, some ingested more than others. It definitely takes into effect the individual girl's work ethic, basically. We see this today. Today we see people at work, maybe you or even somebody that you know, maybe got ill from something they did at work, either the work environment, what chemicals they were breathing in, or even ergonomic issues. If you're sitting at a computer and you're not sitting properly, your neck could be affected, your back could be affected. All these things are compiled into the labor law. Okay, so let's get back into the lawsuit. Once the 5 Radium girls were able to obtain a proper diagnosis of radium narcosis, they needed to figure out how they would claim relief. At the time, the workers' compensation statute contained an exclusive listing of specific occupational diseases, and radium narcosis was not included, obviously, because it was just discovered. It was super new. So the only way the girls could claim a remedy was based on common law. The women claimed that the U.S. Radium Corporation did not meet the common law standards as to providing a safe work environment. Additionally, the complaint identified the radioactive paint as an ultra hazardous material. It would be subject to strict liability for any injuries associated with it. Okay, so finally, the last big hurdle the women faced was the statute of limitations. This specific case of the Radium Girls, it was based in New Jersey. The law at that time of the statute of limitations, which is basically the statute of limitations is how long you have to claim a lawsuit against injuries. That was within 2 years of the relevant injury. The girls' only recourse was to petition the Court of Chancery. Ultimately, the lawsuit was settled out of court, mostly because there was so much publicity to this specific case, and it was very negative. And the company just wanted it over and done with. The unfortunate part is within 5 years of the settlement, all 5 girls were dead. The case was settled in autumn of 1928. The girls each received $10,000, which is equivalent to about $151,000 today, and a $600 per annuity, which is equivalent to about $9,000 today, plus $12 a week, equivalent to $200 today, for all of their lives while they lived. All the medical and all the legal expenses would be paid by the company as well. But like I said before, the lifespan of these women were less than 5 years. Also, the outcome of this lawsuit and the publicity surrounded and how harsh the labor environment was, it was a huge factor to the establishment of the occupational disease labor law. Any radium dial painter from that point forward had to wear protective equipment. In particular, they no longer shaped paintbrushes by lip and avoided any ingestion or breathing of the paint. Radium paint was still used on dials as late as 1970s. This case shaped a lot of the occupational labor laws. How this affects us today is exposure of toxic substances and injurious practices in the workplace continues to generate unknown occupational diseases, and it continues to be problematic in the legal and scientific advancements. The same way that the Radium girls faced hardship and trouble in the 1920s continues to surface in other unrecognizable occupational diseases and mass tort injuries. I just want to ask you a question. Do you or somebody that you know, family, friend, have they been affected with an occupational illness or injury due to their job? If so, what was it? Did they file a lawsuit? If not, what held them back from doing that? Definitely talk to me, leave a review, let me know. Follow me on Instagram and we'll connect. I would love to hear from you girls. I really hope you liked this episode. I am brand new, so bear with me. I feel like I'll get better with each episode. Let me know what I can improve on. If you have any more questions, reach out to me. I'll be here to talk to you. The best way to reach out is on Instagram. Send me a DM at What Like It's Hard Podcast, and I'll personally respond. Check out my website, www.whatlikeitshardpodcast.com, and I have a blog post all about the Radium girls. So if you head over there, I'll provide links to the articles I referenced in this podcast and also the Radium Girls movie. If you haven't seen it on Netflix, definitely check it out. It's an amazing movie. It portrays the story so well. I can't wait for you guys to check out next week's episode, premiering next Tuesday. It's about Molly Bloom. She went from being a skier in training for the Olympics to being charged with running a high-stakes poker game. I hope you have an amazing week, ladies. Crush your goals this week. You got this. I'm here for you. I'm rooting for you. We'll chat next week. Bye.